Morning again, and welcome to the Issachar Foundation Jamaica Public Lecture Series. My name is Philippa Davies, a member of the Issachar Foundation Jamaica and moderator for this morning's lecture on pornography and the young brain, a clear and present danger. If this is your first Issachar Foundation Jamaica lecture, an extra special warm welcome to you. The lecture series provides a discussion forum to explore public policy issues and social trends within the context of the Judeo-Christian worldview, which the foundation unabashedly affirms as the soundest foundation for nation building and human flourishing for everyone. We take our inspiration from the scripture verse from the Holy Bible, 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, which says, the men of Issachar understood the times and knew what Israel should do. So what we want to do in examining public policy issues is to understand the times and to know what we as believers, but also for society, what we should do for the good of all. The Issachar Foundation Jamaica has hosted public lectures since August 2010. Before COVID-19, we used to meet face to face, but since June 22, the lectures migrated online, and this is our 17th virtual lecture. Some of the previous topics were moral inputs, mortal outcomes, bridging the gap between values and crime, uncovering the hidden facts about the NIDS system, weeding the family tree, the generational impact of ganja on the brain, keep us free from evil powers, an expose on the new ACP EU agreement, George Soros, globalism and the threat to human rights, too is better than too many is leaving Jamaica with too few, and comparative jurisprudence on the Privy Council and the Caribbean Court of Justice beyond the Savings Law Clause. I invite you to visit the Issachar Foundation Jamaica YouTube channel to view the previous lectures. And if you are not on our mailing list to receive notification of upcoming lectures, please post it in the chat to me, Philippa Davies, with your full name and email address, and I will then add you to our mailing list. So I'm going to turn it over now to our chairman, Dr. Wayne West, to give his opening remarks and to pray for this morning's lecture. Dr. West?
Well, good morning again, everyone. I just want to thank Dr. Sidney McGill for making himself available to do this presentation this morning. I also want to let the participants who have come in know that unfortunately our other presenter, Ms. Audrey Cole-Crossdale, has had an emergency, and we will be praying for her with respect to that emergency, but she's unable to present this morning. This is a very important topic. It has great implications for our society and for the church. So let us go to God in prayer. Father, as always, we thank you for the opportunity to work in your vineyard, to bring your word to the public square. When Jesus left, he said that we should make disciples of all nations, commanded that they obey everything that he said. And this is our commission as the Issachar Foundation, to inform and to encourage people to obey what God says. With respect to the specific topic this morning, Lord, we pray that persons will be released from the addiction of pornography and freed into the fullness of experiencing you as Lord and Savior, and being totally free from addiction. Pray that the issues raised will be taken not only at this place and at this time, but that it will have an effect not only in Jamaica, but really across the Caribbean and across the world. That persons will come to recognize that this can be a very great weight on a person's ability to function as husbands, as wives, as members of society, and as members of the church. So we pray that we'll have a good meeting, and not only would hear, but that we would do something. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dr. West. And now I will introduce our speaker, our discussant, Dr. Sidney McGill. He's a marriage and family therapist. He holds a Doctor of Ministry degree in Theology and Family Systems, a master's degree in Counseling Psychology, postgraduate diplomas in Clinical Sexology and Leadership Development, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal and Poultry Science. Dr. McGill was formerly the president of the Family Counseling Center of Jamaica and Coalition in Support of Adolescent Leadership Training, CSALT, mentoring program. He lives in the hills of St. Anne and conducts counseling sessions outdoors and online at his beautiful retreat farm. He offers individual, couples, and group counseling sessions and is a popular presenter on relational issues in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Let us welcome Dr. McGill. Dr. McGill, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm hoping that our session can be very enlightening and informative. All right, I want us to first look at the context, or perhaps the history, most recent history of porn addiction, early exposure to porn, especially with teens or tweens, kids that are just in the pubertal period of their lives, so let's say from about nine years old up, and are inquisitive, want to know more about sex. And also we have to look at the family context, the family milieu, because that is where I think the source of the problem is, and that's where the source of the solution is as well, primarily. In other areas, other facilities and institutions that can certainly be of benefit. Now, post-pandemic surge. You remember that time when the pandemic was in its, it was, we're having lots of problems, and the safe distance and no school, we could not collectively be in a space, and the children had to now do their assignments and receive their lectures, instructions online. So many families did not have those devices and had to find ways and means of, making their children, able to access those classes. And so I think that's where the surge of increased access and exposure to pornography became a major issue, at least in my view. So now, a lot of these families are single parent families, and so the children don't get sufficient attention because mother has to work and father maybe has other families minding or doing other things. And so the children, what was minding the children was was the internet. And there, as you well know, there's very little policy or protocols. Families was just trying to survive, in this pandemic. So the pandemic is over, and so a lot of bad habits have been learned over that period and continues to the present moment. Now, a mother might be has to work, and her shift does not allow her to be at home. And so the child leaves home and goes home, and there's no one at home, or maybe one or two other persons not at home, but they don't have the kind of authority over the child. So a lot of times that child will go to the internet cafe. That's another area, the internet cafe, and spends time there on the internet, totally unsupervised. Then you have also parental I call it computer illiteracy or IT illiteracy, where the children know so much more about how to operate their devices and much more than the parents. And so the parents have little authority as to how to manage the use of their child's use of the internet. And then there's dislocation from extended family. Well, you know, years gone by, while the mother's gone to work, there's grandmother, there's uncle, there are extended family members there who can, you know, take up the slot. But it's becoming increasingly, systems are becoming increasingly isolated. All right, so that is the context. Let's move on quickly now to what's going on when that child sees porn. A number of physiological processes begin to take place, as would in any form of addiction. As you well know about the dopamine rush. So the dopamine is that main hormone, feel-good hormone. So if you do something that you enjoy, you get that hormone that comes in that is very pleasurable. And yeah, and you want to repeat that act again, or that activity again. You know, if it's not pleasurable, then you have the stress hormone coming and you can avoid it. Now, so what after with repeated intense stimulation, it can impact the brain. So you have altered brain chemistry taking place. So you find that reward pathways potentially begin to change. And so you find that it leads to desensitization and making it harder to find pleasure in non-pornographic activities. Yes? So in other words, it's going to take more porn views, variety, diverse type of pornography scenarios to give that child or anyone that strong pleasurable surge. It takes more to maintain the habit. So that's one, altered brain chemistry. Then you also have distorted views of sexuality and relationships, because what you see on the screen is not really what is happening in real life. You know, as you know, porn is portioned, a part of. So the genitals are the main focus on what the genitals do in sexual intercourse. And so these children will have unrealistic expectations about sex, unrealistic expectation about intimate relationships. Yes, it's just somehow real, normal relationships just won't, make it for them. It lacks the excitement. It does not have the adrenaline. Well, it does not have the dopamine rush, as it would viewing porn. And then there are the mental issues. That child who continues to watch porn and tries to stop, but is unsuccessful. And they tend to have increased anxiety, depression issues, shame, guilt, and low self-esteem issues. Sorry about that, turning it off. Yes. So, it's just, I'm just giving you just a taste of what is really happening with this child. But there's so much more to look at. Now let's look at a few more things, no? Let's look at, for example, say forms of exploitation and risk. All right. Yes. Yes. So the slide before had forms of exploitation and risk. So what I have been in touch with is quite a few schools are referring children to me, especially boys, mostly boys, with self-generated content. In other words, because the inquisitiveness and curiosity of these children, usually from 9 going up, they will engage in sexual acts and they will record it and somehow they pass it on in the classroom to their friends. And a lot of times it gets out of control and the teacher gets to view sex acts between classmates or just photos of their genitals in their aroused state. Now, then you have revenge porn. Revenge porn is that very same video that was taken, or photos that were taken, and two partners fall out of grace with each other, and so they use it, they broadcast it, they share it all over the place to hurt and to shame their partner, their former partners. And then there's the online predation. I am not that acquainted with that, but I'm sure it's happening where adults find ways and means of getting boys and girls to have sexual intercourse with them through the social media. All right. Then there's the legal regulatory context. That's a slide we are now on. There is Child Pornography Act. Yes, and it involves any pornography that is child related, which can be visual, audio, or written. And there's a very strong, you can get up to 15 years imprisonment if you are found with that material. And so we do have the law in place. My problem is that it is hardly ever enforced. Also, really because of reporting trends. Very little of it is ever reported. They say just about 10%. The surveys that I was looking at says just about 10% of sexual violence done to children is reported. We also have to look at the larger societal context, called sociocultural context, realizing that for many, many years, almost one in four girls are experience sexual violence. The percentage is about 23 point something %, almost 1 in 4, and in boys 1 in 10. So we see sexual abuse in children is prevalent in Jamaica. It's ubiquitous. It's endemic. Well, it's it's something that you breathe. It's part of the culture, and so we don't even it's not even seen as a major issue because you're born and you're dying it. So there are legal gaps to that because you look at how it's being dealt with. If it's ever reported, then it has to be. Then you go through the whole legal process, and it's embarrassing and traumatic for the victim. Yeah, and a lot of times, as you well know, the perpetrator could be a provider or someone that is well known and a friend to the family. So that reduces the possibility of this thing being carried, that child getting help. And most of the time, the child does not even share it with a parent or any adult at all. They continue to grow up with it. Yes. Parental and institutional responsibility. Yeah, parental accountability. It's I think that is where I think that's one of the biggest problem, that so many parents who are so illiterate, computer illiterate, have no clue. Their goal is just to survive, put food on the table and to pay the rent and the utility bills. Everything else is secondary, including spending quality time with the child, because they don't have the time. And so this is where I think that the school where the child attends, and hopefully the church, hopefully that child gets to go to church. So many of them do not. And so there's no kind of counter balance to the negative, what the society is, that these children are exposed to. School challenges, as I mentioned before, I'm accustomed to that. So the school has its protocols and how to deal with this. The child goes to see the child guidance, goes to the child see the child guidance counselor, and they take it from there, contact the parent, and so often the parent is unable to be part of the solution. So the school has to develop more, better ways of helping those parents, especially those single parent families, to cope with this problem. And then there's the psychological impact, which I spoke about earlier. All right, let's move on quickly. So the behavioral science is excessive time spent online. And you see, you would think it's not just children, it's everybody, almost everyone. Excessive time spent online. You go to a family get together, and we're all sitting around the table, and people are on their phones. How often do we have family get-togethers? Maybe once a year or once a decade. But that is how important or how essential our devices have become. It's become a part of our body, in fact. Then there's secrecy and deception. Once this thing is just underground, secret, I'm seeing porn. I'm talking to one or two other people who are also enjoying porn. It makes it even more exciting. It's risky, it's dangerous, and that kind of attitude, just fuels the whole porn addiction. Neglecting responsibilities at home. Yes, dishes to be washed. They're not remembering these things. Homework to be done. Oh, they didn't even bring home the homework because homework is so very boring. It's not exciting at all. Lots of interest in activities. Used to play football, etc. They pay less of it and spend more time in their rooms on their devices. Withdrawal from facilities and friends. This is when it's getting worse. Yeah. They're spending less time with, social interaction and more time by themselves on their phone. And by the way, I'm working with one person now who is an adult, 60 odd years old, who was dealing with porn issues as well, so and it's affecting their ability to function. How much more a child whose brain is still underdeveloped? And then their risky behaviors. Because of inexperience, a lot of these children have no clue as to, what the outcome, consequences of their sexual behavior can be. And then we're quickly moving on. Signs of porn addiction. I think I mentioned that already. Irritability and anxiety increased generally. By that I mean irritability there for me means they get upset easily. They get angry easily. Yeah. And everything becomes a problem to them. You know, guilt and shame. Yes, they start to realize that this thing is wrong and think, but they just can't control it. Depression and low self-esteem. I have so little control over my life. And it's taken over by porn and porn viewing. Desensitization, I think refers to relationships. The relationships don't have that kind of warmth or intimacy or value that it once had. They're just numb to relationships, to being in relationships. And then relational and developmental signs. I mentioned that too about distorted views of sex and relationships, social difficulties because they're growing up and they're accustomed to playing and interacting, and now they're doing less of that, so they have less opportunities to develop their social skills. Changes in behavior towards others, and that's a natural outcome. We're almost to the end of this now. Consequences. I broke it down into 3 areas. The individual, as I mentioned earlier about persistent anxiety and depression, lack of control over their lives, and they know something is wrong, but they just can't manage, can't get out of it. Sexual dysfunction and performance issues. Oh, that's that one I deal with on a regular basis. Well, I deal with it, certainly more than occasional. Sexual dysfunction, I find, because having sexual intercourse in a normal way with a normal human being is not so exciting anymore, because that person is so desensitized to the body, that whole interaction, sexual interplay. It's just not exciting. And you find for men, a lot of men have porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Yes, it's just that they're just not easily aroused. They've been desensitized by frequent porn watching. And then there's a compulsive use because of the compulsive use of it, they just can't function in their normal daily lives. They become unproductive. And let's look at family, the consequences with family: erosion of trust between relationships, from secrecy, betrayals, and broken agreements. Things just not working out anymore. It's regarding roles and rules that a lot of times are not taught, are just, are caught. So all of that falls apart. Emotional neglect and reduced intimacy with family members. Yeah, so the child becomes isolated and prefers to stay by themselves. And that's all a part of the reaction to signs of depression. Parenting challenges. Parents having major issues, not sure where to get help, and themselves needing help as well. So it becomes a emotional chaos and a difficult time for parents. Then look at the society. Increased public health burden from mental health services demand. I have a daughter as a psychiatrist, and I just can't understand why is it that she's burning out constantly, because the work is so overwhelming. There's so many patients to see, and I'm not able to do such a good job, because you see one patient today, you can't see that patient again until another 2 months' time. When this person needs to be seen on a regular basis. So you have the problems here where the whole public health system is having problems dealing with the problem of porn addiction. And then economic productivity losses, because but that is mainly for adults who are at the working age, just not productive. The quality of work that they're doing is poor because they're so distracted from, nothing excites them anymore. So they just go on from one thing to the next, just going through the roads, 1, 2, 3. And what excites them is dangerous, more diverse, more abnormal sexual activity to keep them stimulated and aroused. Normalization of unhealthy sexual norms and misinformation spread through media. Yes, if you do it often enough, and if there are more people involved, then it becomes a norm, a cultural norm, and it's accepted in the society. And that is what we're trying to prevent. The society continuing to be a dysfunctional, increasingly dysfunctional. So what to do if you notice these signs? This is the last slide. Establish practical digital boundaries and monitoring. That's the role of the parent. So we're going to have to teach parents basic skills in use of computer, how to manage restrictions and setting boundaries. And I think courses like that need to be big on the agenda for the Ministry of Education. Yes. Then seek professional help and ongoing recovery plans. And yes. And so I think the school and the church needs to be promoting these services so that parents have access to these services readily. And also to create a safe, non-judgmental family environment. Now, the natural thing is that reaction of parents is anger, disappointment, and so they see the child as a problem, and instead of being supportive, they are defensive. And so we have to teach parents the right attitude, healthy attitude towards recovery for their child. And the last thing is society's responsibility. Yes, everybody has a responsibility towards dealing with this problem of easy access to porn for children. Age verification and access restrictions. That has to be in. China is far ahead of us, by the way, when it comes to those restrictions and protocols. Public health campaigns. Ministry of Health needs to be doing a lot of that, and other ministries combined to deal with it. Funding, research, and treatment. Yeah, we need more child psychologists and psychiatrists, and social work personnel in the field, especially in the schools. Social workers are needed to visit the homes to see the environment these children are in, and make recommendation for change. Curricula, it has to be taught in the schools to these children about the dangers of accessing porn and viewing it. Yes, so essentially that is it. There's so much more to say. And I have a quote here by Alvin Toffler. The illiterate of the future will not be the person who cannot read. it will be the person who doesn't know how to learn. Yeah. And so all of us, I'm sure, are having that problem, learning to we're deciding on what to watch, what news media to watch, and limiting this plethora of information out there, because so much of it is conspiratorial. It's half truths, half baked truths. Where do we get genuine, honest, truthful information? So it's going to take a lot of experience and know-how to find real information that is useful, and not just anything that is on the screen, that pops up on the screen, that we listen to it, watch it, and believe it. So there you have it.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. McGill, for having touched on the very broad issues that constitute this topic of pornography and the impact not only on the young brain, but all individuals who are exposed to the graphic sexual imagery that it is, and the high stimuli of the brain that results, and then because it stimulates the reward neurochemical dopamine, it can lead to addictive behavior. So thank you very much for having touched on all those various issues. We want to have now a deep discussion, and we do have a few questions that our attendees have posted into the chat. So just to let you know, participants, put your questions into the chat. We have muted the audio, but you can put your questions, write your questions into the chat, and I will pick them up and field them to our presenter. And so you looked, Dr. McGill, not only at the nature of pornography and its impact on the brain, but also the risk factors, especially for children being exposed to pornography at an increasingly younger age. We're finding somebody had asked about an 11-year-old. We have children younger, even as
Yes.
8 years old, because once you're on a device, you can be, things come across the screen, and your friends might introduce you to things on the screen. And because pornography is a billion-dollar industry, it is their business model to get their clients early. And once they can hook you in from childhood, and then you are treating a 60-odd-year-old person, that is their business model to get you young. And so they are intentionally aiming for children, targeting children. And then you spoke about the role of parents, but also the wider society. Perhaps you could just look a little bit about the cultural norms that a pornified society would exhibit, and the fact that porn content often exhibits women being demeaned, women being degraded, women are always consenting, or if they say in the video no, that is overridden by the man. So you're communicating this message that the female partner must always agree and consent, ignore the no, and that men can use women's bodies for their pleasure however they wish. That's a commodification, that's an objectification of women. Have you seen this leading into or contributing to high rates of violence against girls and women? It is a factor in our domestic violence context in Jamaica. What do you say about the nature and the messaging of porn in that respect?
Okay, all of what you just mentioned has been around for decades. What the information age has done is just to multiply it by by several hundred times. So everything is in fast mode now. And so what I would consider to be normative, which is the objectification of women, that a woman is seen as an object and a possession, and not as a person, but someone you can a pleasure object, is a common thing. I've seen, on the road where I am in St. Anne, where a young man I mean, sees a woman he doesn't know, and he begins to tell her about her bottom, and I mean, and he's just waxing in lyrics about her, just because she's a sexual object to him, not a person. You listen to the music, the kind of lyrics now that we're listening, we can hear a lot of times in public transport and taxis, etc., where the music is just, it's just, it's not left to your imagination anymore. We put it nicely. It's raw stuff. It's raw stuff, which is no, at one point, this was something that was only played in the privacy of some people's home. Now this is in public domain, becoming more and more normative. And so what I know that what art does, whether it be performing arts, or visual arts, all the art, what they do, they are directive. So in other words, it's increasing people's access and view and of porn, but it's also reflective. It is what's happening that is being reflected back to the society. And so, yes, I'm thinking that what this information age is doing, it's really is destroying whatever little we had left. I know I sound like I'm a doomsayer, but I can't. I'm looking at the negatives because that's what I was trained to do. And wondering how are the onslaught, how are we, who are the conscious ones, and our Christianity is the basis of our consciousness. We know better. How can we cannot sit and be complicit and do nothing. That Issachar Foundation is a good attempt, but we need so much more to be happening to stave off this onslaught of moral degradation that's taking place because of the information age that we are in, and certainly AI is going to take it to the nth degree. So it is cultural. It is becoming more and more cultural and more normative. The behaviors that we would frown at becomes, something that you don't even consider, it's just a norm.
And I'm glad you point to say that it's part of the culture, but this is the challenge that we need to address, not to be afraid to call out the culture, not because it seems to be a part of the landscape of Jamaica that we accept it as being normal and okay. And therefore, once you label it culture, you say nothing or you are not allowed to criticize. So pornography in the Jamaican culture context is not only the videos, but as you say, in the lyrics. They're not only the graphic imagery and expression and instruction in many dance hall lyrics, but also in rap music, hip hop music, and in some calypso songs. They're not so subtle anymore, but we need to call it and say these are also contributing to the pornification of society, and it has devastating impacts on the children, on their developing brain, on their ideas about how they see themselves, how they relate to others, how they conduct themselves in intimate relationships, but just in general interaction in society. As you spoke to that young man who feels he's so free to call to a woman and describe her bodies in a sexual manner. We
Yes.
are drowning in a pornified culture, and we need
Yes.
to call it out. And don't let the academics who defend culture shut you down, because you need to distinguish and discern what is healthy and what is unhealthy and the long-term impacts of culture.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we need if look at gender and see what form of porn which gender prefers. What we've noticed is that women prefer the porn in writing. So
The romance novels and
and novels in writing and in audio novels as well, especially audio novels, because most people are reading less and listening more to books. Men, however, are more focused on visual, and so videos. So men tend to be more vulnerable, or boys tend to be more vulnerable to porn because it's
visually stimulating.
visually stimulating. Correct.
Right. And I think in our response attendees, we need to remember this is not just in Jamaica impacting individuals, but this is a billion-dollar industry. There are statistics to show that there is way more traffic to porn websites than there is on your regular WhatsApp. I mean, your websites like Amazon or Netflix. There's way more traffic to porn websites across the world than your regular ordinary websites. And pornography has ties with prostitution, with human trafficking, with child abuse, with abortion, because it is a distortion of sex, sexual behavior, and male-female relationships. So this is a global problem that has an individual and local effect, but we have to take a stand to speak and call it out for what it is. Let me take some questions. I'm sorry.
No, I guess I was going off a little when I thought recently that it's such a very profitable industry, multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar industry. I was reading recently where this man who does homosexual porn, he's not homosexual, but he does it to make money, and he's now a millionaire, and he's now thanking all the gays for making him a millionaire.
Wow.
So you see, it's largely a highly profitable business, and it doesn't matter who it destroys. You know, what matters is how much money is made.
All right, let's turn to some of our questions. Thank you so much, participants. Dr. McGill, who will teach parents data managing skills? You had spoken about parents exercising that filter and regulation. Yes, Dr. Gill. So the question is, who will teach parents data managing skills?
Yes. I'm thinking any nonprofit institution that is interested in the well-being and welfare of the society, the Jamaican society. So in other words, the church could take it on if the church chooses to deal with. I know the church has so many other areas to work on as well. But certainly, I really think that the Ministry of Education needs to take it on and to be training through the PTA meetings, and that the guidance counselors should be very involved in setting up groups, because the guidance counselors are the ones who are aware of where the problem children are and where the problem homes are, and that they're going to be, as I said before, we need to have social welfare. We need to have persons going out there visiting these homes, because the children who are having the biggest problems, they're not the quiet to preach at. They're hard to access. They're hard to find and to help. So it means going out there and helping, going beyond the boundaries. So I'm thinking that any institution can take that up, yeah, as a responsibility towards educating parents, so that they can manage their children better, rather than just seeing the instrument, the device, as a pacifier. I'm sure you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Where just to keep that child quieted, they turn on the tablet, and yeah, you're right. So how are we going to teach our children to socialize, to be in nature settings, to go to the parks, yes, to be recognized that they're part of their, that their lives is much more than sitting in front of a screen.
Right. And perhaps our attendees are aware that the government of Australia a couple of months back passed a law where they wanted to ban children 16 and under from having digital devices because they are seeing the deleterious impact of the devices, the impact on the cognitive development of children, what they're being exposed to, and just the overwhelming demand on parents and teachers, in addition to the normal expectations of parenting and teaching to now be a manager of devices and dealing with the withdrawal effects of taking children off the internet. This is something that they've grown up with. It's a part of their existence. I mean, how do you overcome that real challenge?
Yeah. Yes, I think China is leading the way in that. In so that parents have to take full charge of how these devices are used by children. Yeah, but first you have to know what you're dealing with, and that's where I think that we need to have persons out there and organizations out there who are taking on that challenge to teach parents how to be more knowledgeable on, other than just going on Facebook, or the other media, that, how do I manage this? I mean, I know a lot of our devices will tell you how much time you spend on the device and thing, but we need to have it really worked out where the child, we know that the child only uses they have to use their computers anyway to do their assignments. Well, a lot of institutions require that. But then how do we block off porn, social media, and other applications from the child's view? So
Right.
so there has to be some kind of app that you put your
Right.
down. Yeah.
And there are a few. So at the end of our discussion, I am going to share some resources with our attendees, apps that software that you can download to manage what content your child accesses on the various devices. We have a comment here: the seeming involvement of the upper echelon of society in child pornography in different countries, even in the Caribbean, is also likely a factor that should be addressed.
Oh, agree. I agree. And I agree because when you have no moral boundary but a lot of money, then you are able to do a lot of damage just for your own selfish gratification. And so because when you have the whole wide field of all sorts of abnormalities, and I mean, because this thing has no end. When it moves beyond just a man and a woman sexually engaged to it has to be now a child, it's just a society rotting. And so but money tends to rule the world. And I don't know how we're going to get around that. But I do think we just need to be educating our children so that they become very conversant and wise, streetwise or computer wise, so that they know when they see a danger sign, they can walk away from it before they get engulfed in it.
Right. We have a question here. Would you agree that if one discovers that his fiance or her fiance has a porn problem, the marriage should be canceled?
No, I think a porn problem is a symptom of other problems. Yes. And so I think you really should go and get access a good counselor who has that background of sexual dysfunctions, etc. to work with you and work with your partner before you make that decision to walk away. Yes, so porn addiction for me is symptomatic of underlying issues. And a lot of times you'll find that the underlying issues are relationship issues, or the lack of relationship, meaningful relationship, especially in the early formative years. And the person recognizing that they have, that their pro-social skills are so poor, and that they're not they don't have any meaningful relationship. Hence the need for porn and view and gratification of it. So
Right.
yeah, so go deeper. It's more than just the porn. That's the problem.
Right. And I have read a psychologist who started a men's group, a men's forum for those who are addicted and were struggling, wanting to leave pornography, consuming pornography, and found, as you said, underlying issues. They felt, as men, disconnected from life. They're feeling isolated. They feel there's so much hostility towards men just as being men, their identity as men, and they were feeling anxious and depressed about that disconnectedness, poor relationship. And so the porn was an escape. It was a way to treat or to find affirmation, even though what they're watching is so distorted. It was in a disordered way, affirming them and as men and their feelings. And so this is what came out in these underlying issues came out in that forum. Let me move on because we do have quite a few comments. Are there any theories or studies that link personality types to porn, or does porn in the young brain tend to shape a particular personality? For example, making a hypersensitive individual or introvert. I think you kind of touched on that it is either exacerbating an underlying issue, or because of the porn, it triggers anxiety and depression. So then you see the introvert or hypersensitive individual coming out.
That's a very interesting question, which I'm not too sure I have the answer for when it comes to personality. Are there certain personalities that are more prone? I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is that exposure to the porn by the young brain, it certainly influences the rest of that person's life in a very significant way, and where sex becomes the central part of their lives, everything else is secondary. And so yes, my focus is not so much on the personality. I think, as I said before, so much has to do with relationships, the quality of relationships that this person lived or experienced in their early childhood developmental years up to now, which affects their self-esteem, etc. So it really is. I think I'm going to hazard a guess that it's more environmental than biological or personality derived.
Okay, next question. Are young girls just as prone to porn than young boys? I would say yes. In fact, the porn marketers consider the female market now their target, having saturated their capture of men. And it is women also watching porn, making porn, and being influenced in seeing themselves as only there to please men, and having a devalued sense of their worth as individuals. So yes, girls are as prone and as targeted as young boys.
They are, but maybe not as visually, but certainly what they're now having is what they do now with the videos is that it's narrated. And so with girls, if you focus more on the emotional side of the sexual activity, then it will attract more women into pornography.
Since young teens are already going through biological changes, how can we reach these children to let them see the potential destructive nature of pornography on their behavior?
That's a simple answer to that, and that is it has to be part of the curriculum. from certainly from in primary school upwards, right through primary school and through secondary schools, that it has to be part of a curricula. And I'm thinking it has to stand out, not just home studies. But because it's becoming such a major problem in all societies, it has to be taken separately by itself, and that we look at the whole psychological, emotional, spiritual, physical, and that includes all of the STIs that child can have. It has to be taken on by itself in a curriculum.
Next question. How does a man who is addicted to porn have his needs met by his wife in the relationship?
Wow. As I said before, I think we have to, with that man, I'm going to find what the underlying issues are that's causing the addiction. Because yes, we're focusing on porn addiction, but I'm looking generally at addiction in general, that has the same symptoms, same behaviors, etc. Compulsive behavior. I'm going to be working with that person to look at relationships and the disappointments or the trauma that this person experienced during childhood. And we're going to have to try and mend all of that and to forgive and, go through. Yeah. But somehow the person has to stop watching all this porn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say stop immediately. I'm going to say, okay, you're going to start limiting yourself. If you used to watch porn, say 1.5 hours per day, now we're going to cut it down to just 20 minutes per day. And write a journal, keep a journal to see how you're feeling now that you've rationed your porn viewing and thing. And I would want that partner to be also part of the whole therapeutic plan in supporting, because it's an emotional problem. We're not just trying to just get rid of the porn watching, we're trying to get rid of the reason for the porn watching. Yes, so
right.
That's what I would do.
Right. And some may say that porn is really not about sex, but it is the compulsive behavior for that underlying issue that they're trying to address that you've spoken to. And the reality is that having porn in a relationship, you're actually having an affair because you've brought a stranger, another party, multiple parties into the relationship that you're being stimulated by. And that will have an impact on the relationship that you have with the living person in front of you. And there are studies that show that being a compulsive consumption of pornography is going to reduce your ability to be attracted to a real life human being in front of you. So that relationship also is going to be facing major challenges. Next question. What is the current impact of the LGBTI agenda on our children in this?
Oh.
Would you want me to venture a suggestion or a
You please do.
Right. Well, the LGBT agenda is sexual based, and it is a distortion of sexual identity and relationships.
Yes.
And so drawing children into early sexual stimulation and the content of the porn, because there is a lot of homosexual and lesbian content that is pervaded through the porn websites that can stimulate children to experiment. And because Dr. Gill spoke about the actual reality of our biology by design, there is a reward chemical that is released when you engage in sexual activity. It is a hook to continue the same behavior that's going to give you that rush, that high. And so if the child has experimented with a homosexual contact or lesbian contact, they'll be hooked in, but then it is a disordered practice of sexual intimacy, and then there will be deleterious outcomes that flow from that. So homosexual content or video, pornography video, is also drawing the child into masturbate. So they are stimulating themselves, and homosexual contact is a stimulation of self. a lot of masturbation as well. And that is also undermining their ability to bond with another human being of the opposite sex because they're deriving the satisfaction by stimulating themselves. So it is really a spiral downward, pornography.
Add to what's up nowadays is that the boundary between heterosexuality and homosexuality is now blurred. And so, and so what you have happening is that I no longer talk about gays. I don't really use that word anymore. The word I use is MSM, men having sex with men, because you have a lot of men who are bisexual, you have a lot of men who are heterosexual, but engage in homosexual activity because of the just the exploring boundaries. And so that whole thing of LGBTQ versus heterosexuals is blurring, and it is not only it's being blurred privately, because I know of so many cases, and if eventually, if we're not careful, it becomes normative.
Is there an age group that is most fascinated by porn?
But that's an interesting one. I'm thinking so much of that. I'm not even seeing it so much as an age group. Age group is a factor, but I also thinking of the how that person is grows up and the environment in which they grow up in, and how sex is viewed and treated, in that environment is certainly going to play a role, and as well as personality. So there's so many contributing factors that's going to determine whether or not age is a matter. But certainly in those early adulthood years, from late teenage years into early adulthood, into the 40s, sex is a dominant factor in everyone's life in that period. Mark you, they're always, I'm just speaking generally, because there are exceptions to every rule. And because I know it's also not only driven by the cultural expectations and norms, but also by the biology, the testosterone levels that are peaking, in the 20s, And so there are many factors to consider to answer that question.
Right. So you had spoken about the societal responsibility and named various stakeholders, parents, church, school, Ministry of Education. Somebody adds the Broadcasting Commission has a role as well, social workers. Really and truly, if you consider porn to be the public health crisis of the digital age, it requires everybody on board. And this is not only children, this is adults as well. And if we understand the ties that it has to other challenges, major issues in society having to do with just social relationships, then everybody has to be on board.
Exactly.
Some parents would have to be forced to participate. They don't do so willingly in terms of learning how to manage device usage, because they themselves may have addictions in dealing with devices and the time they spend on devices. But yes, we have to, because parents are the first filter, the first protectors, the first regulators, the first teachers, the first everything for their children.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that it needs to be somehow in the law as well. I mean, I showed that where a parent is obligated, to follow through when it comes to managing the device, that they can be penalized for not doing so. It's so important that that parents learn, that it's compulsory that they learn.
Right. What do you think should happen to parents who watch pornography in the presence of young children? And not just parents, but I just think adults generally. I remember some years ago hearing a teacher from an inner city community speak about how on the close, because the roads were very close where persons lived, they would just set up a white tent in the road and plunk everybody, children and adults, to watch pornography, open air.
Yeah, I think there should be a law against that. Because I mean, I've dealt with cases like that where the boy who is 9 years old is in the living room, sitting in the room with his father, watching explicit pornography. Yeah, and the mother brings the child to me because the child wants to watch it when the father is there. It's not there. I think there needs to be this is where the government comes in, and there needs to be a law that mitigates things like that happening. That is a father who is grossly irresponsible.
Right. Another comment, shouldn't children be taught to see sexual activity as relationship and responsibility based, a gift and not a right, and that pornography distorts and debases this values-based approach?
I need not add to that. That's perfectly said.
Okay. A question, when did teaching children about sex become a thing? I don't know if you had said something when this question came in, but when did teaching children about sex become a thing?
So I'm not sure I understand the question.
I wonder if it's whether who should be teaching children, because ideally it should be parents. I
Yeah.
remember parents to talk about children in the context of relationship, healthy relationship between man and woman, and they would see that ideally see that healthy relating between mom and dad. And when the children starts to ask questions, where did I come from? It would be a natural, organic discussion between, parents and children. But many parents are not teaching their children about sex. It has now been foisted onto teachers at school who might be uncomfortable in doing so. But the sad reality is that children are looking to porn as their replacement sex education. And
True.
because of that, we have to intervene so that they have the correct worldview, the corrected lens, and for them to be able to discern that what they're getting from porn is actually destructive and a lie.
Yes. I think you teach porn. Yeah, sorry. You teach sexual health and sexuality in a developmental way. And that is how I was taught. I think it might be changing now. So it means that it's the birds and the bees at 2 years old. Yeah. And then you gradually take it up, when the child begins to understand how their genitals function, etc. Then you take it further. It should be a gradual thing. So that and as one person said earlier, that it's relational, not just a thing. Yes, because the thing objectifies is being objectified, and not a love relationship or an intimacy in a relationship, but as a sexual gratification for one person taking. It's in other words, that thing sounds like a commodity that I can purchase, I can take because it gives me pleasure, and not as a one mode of sharing a love between two consenting persons, adults.
Another question, Dr. McGill, was surely porn addiction is different from other addictions, at least in terms of the sequelae.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that the basics, the whole physiology of it, and people's reactivity are similar, but the outcomes that the sequel is, yeah, there's some difference, of course. Yeah. But I'm looking at the brain and how the brain deals with it. It's very similar. How the brain, how it gets the pathway changes, the reward pathway changes. That's common in all addiction scenarios.
So I have a comment that the church needs to be more intentional about teaching biblical expectations of sex within marriage. We cannot continue to put our heads in the sand and ignore that which affects us all. The culture of silence and ignorance has exacerbated this issue. And well, thank you. We hope this webinar and other discussion fora like this are helping to break through this gradually. But what is happening is child abuse. Saying nothing and doing nothing is child abuse.
True. One thought that came to me as you read that is, I think the church, and I guess it has to do with denomination, that needs to come with decide on what a definition of and the nature of sex. Because I know churches, denominations, different denominations have different views on sex. Yeah, so when it comes to even things like sexual orientation, there are churches that see no problem with it at all. So how do we deal with those things? I mean, I guess we are focusing on pornography. Yeah, I mean, and just I don't think we should be going into the orientation issues, because you have pornography is on both sides, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. It has the same effect on the child.
How early do you think sex education should begin with children? As many parents shy away from this topic, and some teachers as well, especially at the primary level. I think you had started to touch on it as it's it's age appropriate. You
Yes,
talk about
age
the parts
appropriate.
of the body,
Yes,
good touch, bad touch, that sort of
exactly. It
teaching.
starts at about 2-year-old, I would say about 2 years old. Yes.
All right, Dr. McGill, I'm going to share my slides now just to share with our attendees some resources that are accessible and available on this topic, and to help parents and interested and concerned adults to be able to broach this topic. In the meanwhile, I'm going to just ask you not to share your slide, but just to look back for the quote that you had shared at the end. We'd love to hit again. So let me share my slide while you look for the quote. Okay. All right, so friends, just to remind us of some useful portions of scripture that help to frame the discussion that we're having today, that we're saying not to conform to the pattern of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Then we'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. It is about the mind, what we consume, what we take in by the ears, by the eyes, what the brain does with it, and how it impacts the choices that we make and how we relate to each other. So here is one resource that is available. It's called Covenant Eyes. It's a Christian organization, and they have an app software that you can download onto the various devices that will regulate your use of the internet, and particularly put up red flags and block going on to porn websites. So you can download, put it on the various devices, and it would send a signal to an accountability partner. Whether it's a parent for the child's devices, or between adults, if you know you have a weakness and a vulnerability to visit pornographic sites, you would have an accountability partner who would get a signal that you're going on to this website that is being blocked, but to be able to hold you accountable. What is happening? Why are you going to this website? Where you're at? What's happening in emotional life? So it's helping persons regulate, and they're offering a software to do so. There is also this book called The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It. Very useful read, written by Sam Black, who is one of the directors at Covenant Eyes. You can get it in a paperback as well as a Kindle version, but there are lots of presentations by him on YouTube where he talks about the book, as well as how to help churches address pornography use and to become a place of healing and accountability. So Sam Black is his name. Look him up on YouTube, as well as his book, The Healing Church. Another resource is Fight the New Drug, which this organization, also Christian based, but they're helping everyone, regardless of your religious orientation or whether you have none. The fact that this is a human issue, They raise awareness and educate on the harmful effects of pornography. So they have lots of resources and research, as well as talking points to help adults start the conversation with children about pornography. They have an amazing documentary, 3-part documentary, Brain Heart World. I highly recommend that you watch it. It's 30 minutes each episode, and it is nice and hip vibes, youth vibes. So it would be very attractive to watch with teens, tweens, and young adults, and to have a discussion with them. It's available freely from the Fight the New Drug website. Do check it out, Fight the New Drug. Then there is NoFap, which was started by men overcoming their porn addictions. And it helps people, men and women, overcome porn addiction, excessive masturbation, and other compulsive sexual behavior. They have support groups, community forum, as well as information. So do check it out, NoFap, get a new grip on life. Then there's Culture Reframed, which is also an excellent resource with lots of research, lots of talking points, lots of support for parents. Was started by Professor Gail Dines, who wrote Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality. And through Culture Reframed, they offer porn critical sex education curricula that schools could look at integrating some of the modules into the existing sex education curricula. But it's about giving children that awareness and understanding of what the lie and what the truth is about sexual identity and behavior. They have lots of research material freely available, and they also have training courses for parents on how to initiate that conversation and how to maintain the conversation, an open door for parents or caring adults, concerned adults, to be able to talk to children about pornography. And a really great resource written by the late Gary Wilson, Your Brain on Porn, lots of information on the impact on the neuroscience. He has passed, but his information is available. He has talks available on YouTube. His initial TEDx talk is also available. Great information. Now, let me just warn you, the pro-porn industry really attacked this man. So you will also find a lot of demeaning, accusatory, condemning comments about him, because they knew he was speaking truth and they tried to stop him, but he refused to stop. He wouldn't. God bless him. So just be aware that you will find some opposing views that are trying to trash the science, but really and truly, there is so much research just proving the truth about the deleterious, devastating effect of pornography. So Your Brain on Porn is available, and it's been translated into multiple languages. There's also Defend Young Minds. They also provide books that you can use at different age groups, how to talk to children, initiate the conversation. But they also have a parent forum. You can sign up on email, and they will give you information on latest publications, latest discussions, latest things that are happening globally about pornography, and how to empower parents and caring adults in approaching this issue and helping their children. And just to let you know that there is a phone that was put up by this company called Bark, where they will actually help parents to be able to monitor their children's use of internet while empowering them by having a device to make phone calls. But it will have the features of getting alerts 24/7, managing screen time, blocking websites, location tracking, monitoring the content. So if you would like me to send these slides to you, please put your name and email address in the chat. I can send these slides to you. If you're interested, send me an email at issacharfoundationja@gmail.com. But I know this would have been a quick run through, but I'll be happy to send these slides with the information available to you. So have you been able to find the quote?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes. By Alvin Toffler, the illiterate of the future will not be the person who cannot read. It will be the person who doesn't know how to learn.
Can you say it again, please?
The illiterate of the future will not be the person who cannot read. It will be the person who doesn't know how to learn.
Thank you. So yes, folks, we have to learn how to manage the challenges of this age and to help our children and young people safely navigate it so they can reach healthy adulthood. There is another question I'm going to pick up. There was also teaching regarding the fact that our bodies develop more rapidly based on foods we now eat. Does that suggest the need for early education on sex and responsible activity?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Of course, yes. Whether you're eating very nutritious food that makes you go faster, or not, early sex education is critical now because of how easily accessible porn is. So I would say whether it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're eating well and growing faster and taller than your father. You just need to be follow the development. I'm sure you can find resource there about sex education in a developmental way.
Okay, I'm going to take one more comment before I hand over to Carol Bridge, who will bring closing remarks. Flyers posted on walls and light posts announcing parties have become so sexually explicit, it's frightening. The children don't have to go on devices to see porn.
Yeah, that's the normative aspects of porn, and so it means then because it's so common, the child does not see it. It doesn't have an arousal effect on the child or anyone anymore, because it's so open and public now, and so I'm saying that I don't think we're going to ever get back to that place where, where sexuality becomes something that is shrouded in whether it be a dress or whatever. Everything is becoming more and more explicit. And so how do you manage the whole thing? How do we go about living lives, not only in a public sphere, but also private sphere? Because so many times what we say in public and what we do in private are completely different. So we are being untrue to ourselves and to our relatives and friends. So it has to be our own honesty towards the whole thing as well, and guided by Christian principles, guided by our Christian views and how we live our life as Jesus did. So important. I know it won't, and it's not that we're trying to get back to 50 years ago and how the views were then. We have to evolve as Christians as well, but in a way that it's under, where the Christian principles and how Jesus lived is undergirded by how we experience our reality currently.
Yes, worldview indeed matters.
Yes.
It's in your private space and choices that you make, as well as your public interaction, and how to teach our young people how to value modesty and decorum. It's not a Victorian age issue. It's still very much relevant today. When I think about some of the styles of fashion clothing these days for girls and women, the cut of the blouse and the dress or the shorts and the pants, I mean, it is also pornographic and porn stimulating the way some of these fashion styles are. But a return to more modesty and decorum, healthy appreciation of self and body and for others, and how we relate to each other in a healthy way. Thank you very much, Dr. McGill. Really appreciate your presentation and interaction today, your availability. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand over now to Carol Bridge, a member of the Issachar Foundation, who will bring her closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. McGill, for a very informative and practical presentation. We have seen from what you've presented that pornography is extremely dangerous to the young mind, to all of us actually, and that private acts have public consequences. So you looked at the context in the family of what enhances this behavior. Children being minded by the internet, single mothers not being able to pay attention, dislocation of extended family, isolated because the family is not able to pay attention. So the child really spends a whole lot of time on the online. And that was enhanced by the pandemic. Then you looked at the physiological processes on the mind of the child. The mind of the child who regularly engages in pornography. And I had been looking at something that the largest consumer group of internet porn are actually children aged from 12 to 17. And I heard somebody asking if porn addiction is like other addictions. It's actually an epidemic. It's so easy for children to get hooked because they have such easy access to the internet, to tablets, computers, smartphones, all sorts of devices that, as you said, Dr. McGill, are like part of their bodies. Actually, experts in this field are calling the internet the crack cocaine of sexual addiction. And you refer to the fact that watching this material all the time gives the brain a dopamine rush, activates our feel-good hormone, and therefore we need to keep repeating this pleasurable activity. And that rewires the brain. The young brain, as you pointed out to us, is very pliable, and it alters the brain chemistry. And actually, I was reading, I had to do some counseling in this area. And I was reading Kirk Franklin about his particular story. You know, he was a worship leader. Yeah. And he got hooked at 8 years old by just looking at one piece of pornography. And I know this is true, and I'm making myself very vulnerable here, that as a young person around that age, I myself as a female got hooked on it. And the truth is that it was not because I was neglected, but simply because the material was all around my house. So you did point out the fact that people have to be very responsible adults in how they view things, because children are all around and they view these things and they see them around them. I don't think I was in a situation, I mean, every situation is different, but I don't think I was in a situation where I was neglected. I just was one of those lively, curious minds, which children are, that picked up things visually. And I didn't have the access in those days that the children have now.
Oh, yes.
And it also reminded me, when you spoke about the impact on the young brain, that some years ago we had an exhibition at the National Art Gallery. I'm also an artist, and there's a difference between art and pornography. And it can be a very blurred thing. And there was this exhibition that was literally pornographic, and the children were being invited to come and see it. Children's minds are very pliable and they view things differently. So you spoke about how viewing all of this gives us a distorted view of sexuality and relationships, that there's a focus on genitalia and there's unrealistic expectations about sex and what is normal in relationships. And then you spoke about the effects on the brain of the child, that what it comes out in behavior, increased anxiety and aggression, irritability. The child experiences shame, depression, low self-esteem issues, and that these are things to look out for if you want to know if children are engaging in this kind of behavior. Then you also spoke about forms of exploitation and risk. And I thought it was very informative that you spoke about how, because I know this in my relationship with children now, that children are taking pictures of themselves and sharing it, and that the revenge porn that comes out of this, we have read about this in the media. So it also exposes children to adult risk, that adults find ways and means to get children engaged in sex online. You know, there are all these chat rooms and so on. And then you also spoke about the legal regulatory context, you know, that there are laws that we can use. but they're hardly ever enforced. And one of the reasons of this, as you did point out, is that it's very embarrassing for people to report this, to make yours. One of the things that you did mention is accountability is so important. And so people don't really want to report this behavior. Often the abusers themselves are within the family. They're also often the providers. So it's very embarrassing and also very difficult for children to report. Often children are threatened that they're not to report this kind of behavior. And one very big point I thought you brought out was the computer illiteracy of many, many parents. Children are amazingly, they know how to get around the internet, and the parents don't have a clue. So yes. You spoke about the very important, well, Philippa showed us many protocols, but the very important thing of parents becoming literate on how to prevent their children from getting onto these sites. Parents we have to have education about, parental education about how to use the computer and prevent this kind of behavior. And I think you spoke about signs of porn addiction, the family challenges that come with that, and what we should do to, that the church and the school need to provide curricula to help us, Ministry of Education. In fact, everybody needs to get involved. Society has a responsibility in helping to prevent this behavior and to treat it. One of the things, I saw somebody ask a question, and you had addressed it as well, about whether if you find your spouse is involved in this behavior, should you just leave them? Well, Kirk Franklin's experience was that his wife, it was destroying his marriage, and you spoke about the dysfunction that comes from this, starting from childhood, but of course he carried his pornographic addiction. The brain is on dopamine, it's rewired from a child. It continues right into the marriage. A lot of people think that when they engage in this activity, it will make their marriage better, but it actually makes it much more dysfunctional, because there is objectification of the person, and that person, that normal flesh and blood person, cannot provide that level of excitement. They need more and more and more gratification, instant gratification. That person cannot provide that level of excitement, and so the marriage begins to fail. But one of the things that really seemed to help him, and you mentioned it, was the support of the spouse. You go for counseling, but you also support that person. Give them and you spoke about that with children, give them a safe and non-judgmental space to be supported. Porn addiction can be overcome with professional counseling. But you know what worked for me, and I want to say it as well, because we are here as a Judeo-Christian Issachar Foundation, is that for me, nothing could break that addiction. And a lot of people don't know that females have that addiction. But nothing could break that addiction for me except God. And I can tell you very quickly and briefly that I became a committed Christian. I gave my life to Christ. And very shortly after that, I was in an isolated space, because as we say, it's a hidden behavior. You can engage in it. Yes, there are outward signs of it, but you can engage in it in an anonymous way. And people think that that makes it, not a real problem, but it destroys the person. It destroys the marriage. It destroys relationships. It destroys you. So here I was, a new Christian, and you can watch porn anytime, in the middle of the day, anytime. And I was with a whole lot of people, and I was just kind of tired of people, because it makes you socially isolated. I went upstairs to where this house was, turned on the TV, and bam, just as it turned out, there was a pornographic movie going on. But no, I knew that I should be different. So yeah. I prayed instantly. And then I switched the channel, because, one of the things of helping porn is not to feed the wolf. You don't feed that behavior. As you spoke about lessening the behavior, less and less time spent in it. But also, Philippa shared a scripture about renewing the mind. So when I switched the channel, weirdly enough, there was Billy Graham preaching a sermon. So here was this battle going on in my mind. Billy Graham, the pornographic movie. Billy Graham, the pornographic movie. I just remember crying out, God help me. And do you know, I've never watched porn. That is over 50 years ago. My mind is white clean. I'm not in any way attracted to images like that. In fact, they totally disgust me. And it was an instant deliverance. Now, that may not be so for some people. It's a process for some people. But Teen Challenge, which deals with addictions of drugs, somebody had asked, is porn addiction different from other addictions? Yes, in some ways, but not in the main way, which is that it is a behavior that the brain likes to get a rush on. And they find in Teen Challenge that when the mind is renewed, when the heart and the spirit are renewed, sometimes there's an instant deliverance. So I just say this to say that that is also possible. But Dr. McGill, thank you so much, because the main thing is that children's minds are like wet cement, you know, whatever comes in impresses itself on them and stays. It continues, just like it did with Kirk Franklin, just like it did with me, just like it did with so many others. The reason why I make myself vulnerable to all these people here is, one, to know that it happens young, as you pointed out. Two, to show that it male and female, it can happen. Three, doesn't necessarily have to be in a terrible household. Very common. The images are everywhere. The young mind is impressionable. But four, to know that professional counseling, there is help out there, that we must take definite stances, like putting it in the school curricula. We must have discussions. We must make ourselves in the church and in school vulnerable to have these discussions. So I thank you very much for your very practical and wonderful presentation. And I hope it will help somebody out there who is struggling with this, and also prevent children from getting caught in it. Thank you so much, Dr. McGill.
Thank you.
Yes, so with that, we bring our lecture to a close.
Yes, thank you very much, Carol. Thank you again, Dr. Gill. Thank you, everyone who joined us. I've gotten the email addresses, and you will get the slides. And look out for the next Issachar Foundation public lecture. Do have a good rest of the weekend. Thanks again for coming. Bye-bye.